Coming up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, US President Barack Obama authorizes airstrikes against Islamist militants in northern Iraq to protect American interests and tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians under siege on a mountain. Prosecutors seek the first arrest of an incumbent lawmaker in connection with a national campaign to end corrupt ties between government officials and the private sector. Plus, the World Health Organization mulls emergency steps to cope with the Ebola outbreak as Liberia begins stopping people from affected regions from entering the capital. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Friday, August 8th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Oh-jin Ju.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Brew. And we start with the brutal conflict in Iraq. Within the last hour or so, US President Barack Obama authorized both airstrikes and humanitarian aid in northern Iraq, which has been overrun by an increasingly powerful Islamist militant group in recent months.
Obama said the U.S. could not turn a blind eye to the situation any longer. Connie Lee has more.
It's a green light to help those being persecuted in Iraq. U.S. President Barack Obama has ordered targeted airstrikes in northern Iraq and airdrops of humanitarian aid.
Today I authorized 2 operations in Iraq. Targeted airstrikes to protect our American personnel and a humanitarian effort to help save thousands of Iraqi civilians who are trapped on a mountain without food and water and facing almost certain death.
The president, however, emphasized that America would not be dragged into another war in Iraq. The Islamic militant group ISIS is gaining ground in northern Iraq, most recently seizing the largest Christian town of Qaraqosh and forcing tens and thousands of Christians and ethnic minorities to flee. The United Nations says about 40,000 of them are trapped in northern mountains. They've been ordered by militants to convert to Islam or face execution.
Women and children are being killed. We cannot get help. I have 4 children and I don't know where they are. 2 have disappeared and I don't know what happened to the other 2.
Mass killings of religious and ethnic minorities are reportedly taking place, with militants even beheading children. This, according to one Christian leader in Iraq speaking to CNN. The United Nations Security Council, after an emergency meeting on the situation on Thursday, condemned the attacks and called on the international community to support Iraq. Just in the past 2 days alone, ISIS militants with their black flags have taken over 6 towns in the north of the country. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And here in Seoul, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has called for swift passage of a stack of urgent economic bills that are needed to carry out government plans to get the economy back on its feet. He said there is no time to lose as the problems with Korea's economy are structural and complex. Kwon So-ah has this report.
At least 30 economic bills need to be passed as soon as possible to ensure they don't miss the golden time of a chance to revitalize the nation's economy. This is what Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said at an emergency meeting with economy-related ministers on Friday, once again putting pressure on lawmakers who have more than 7,000 bills awaiting parliamentary approval. Choi asked for the National Assembly's cooperation, stressing that this is the last chance to put the focus on raising household income, which should in turn boost domestic demand and the overall economy. He warned there wasn't much time, emphasizing the country's GDP increased a mere 0.6% in the second quarter of the year from the previous quarter. The minister said out of the 30 most urgent bills, 18 concern the investment sector, 6 the normalization of the housing market, 3 are related to public welfare, and another 3 on the protection of financial and private data. To fulfill that goal, Choi asked that all ministers take the issue directly into their own hands to gain the understanding and cooperation of the people and the assembly, and told them he will be closely monitoring their progress. The government's new tax revision on conglomerates and others will be subject to parliamentary revision at a plenary session next week. Since before his inauguration as finance minister in July, Choi's priority has been on revitalizing the economy by easing financial regulations, which runs in line with President Park's deregulation drive. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
In the wake of April's ferry disaster, President Park Geun-hye has vowed to crack down on collusive ties between government agencies and the private sector. And for the first time since, an arrest warrant has been sought against a member of the National Assembly over suspicions that he took tens of thousands of dollars from a company in exchange for benefits. Connie Kim reports.
State prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant for a National Assembly member over bribery charges. Ruling Saenuri Party representative Cho Hyun-yong is suspected of taking more than $150,000 from local train part supplier Sampyo ENC in return for awarding the company lucrative contracts. The prosecution accuses Cho of taking money from the Korea Rail Network before and after he was elected as a lawmaker in 2012. This marks the first time for an acting National Assembly member to be summoned since President Park vowed to root out corrupt ties between government officials and the industries they regulate following April's Haeworo ferry sinking. The president had apologized for the government's mishandling of the ferry disaster, which he partly blamed on corruption. It's common in Korea for retired bureaucrats to be hired by companies and public institutions that expect them to pressure their former colleagues or subordinates to ignore corrupt or irregular practices at the organizations. As of now, one sitting representative from the ruling party and 3 from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy are under suspicion of receiving bribes. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The top diplomats of Korea and China will meet this afternoon on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Myanmar to discuss the North Korean nuclear issue. During the talks, Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is expected to call on his counterpart Wang Yi to continue trying to persuade North Korea to soften its stance on the nuclear issue. The two will also likely discuss the latest series of missile launches by the North. Friday's talks follow an agreement reached by Presidents Park Geun-hye and Xi Jinping during summit talks last month, in which the two leaders set up conditions to resume the six-party denuclearization talks, which haven't been held since 2008.
Now, a Korean American who runs a Christian NGO in a Chinese city on the border with North Korea is being investigated by Chinese authorities. According to sources on Thursday, Peter Han has been under interrogation by Chinese authorities for the last 3 weeks and is now banned from leaving the country. People working in the region presume that Han's case is part of a wider sweep of Christian-run NGOs and businesses along the Chinese side of the border with North Korea. The sources say they don't know what exactly prompted the probe, but it does coincide with an investigation into a Canadian Christian couple who ran a coffee shop in the nearby city of Dandong. They are being questioned over suspicions they stole military and intelligence secrets. Staying in China, and China has executed a third South Korean convicted of smuggling and selling drugs. This on Thursday, fewer than 24 hours after it executed 2 other South Korean nationals found guilty of similar charges. Sources say a district court in Qingdao, Shandong province ordered the execution of the 56-year-old South Korean, identified only by his family name Jang, for smuggling almost 12 kilograms of methamphetamine into China and selling it there. Jang was arrested back in 2009. His execution came 1 day after 2 South Koreans were executed in China's Jilin province, also for drug offences. Japan's wartime sex slavery and its ongoing lack of repentance on the issue could stand in the way of the country's attempt to gain a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. This, according to diplomatic sources at the UN, as international calls grow for Japan to atone for forcing tens of thousands of women into sexual slavery before and during World War II. The sources said the unresolved issue, which came back under the spotlight very intensely following a recent landmark visit of 2 Korean victims to the White House, will likely work against Tokyo ahead of the UN General Assembly in September. Now, Japan is pushing for a UN Security Council reform while also seeking to obtain a permanent membership along with Germany, India and Brazil.
And time now for a look through some of the other international headlines we're following on this Friday afternoon. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the News Center.
Eunice, we're about 2 hours away now from the expiry of a 3-day, 72-hour Gaza ceasefire, but it's likely the truce could be called off even before that time.
Right, Mark. Just within the past hour or so, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, said that 2 rockets were fired from Gaza and hit southern Israel in violation of that ceasefire. The announcement was made on Twitter on IDF's official page. We are still waiting on confirmation on the fate of that temporary humanitarian ceasefire that had brought a lull to the Gaza Strip for the past 3 days. Now, it is about 6:10 in the morning there right now in that region. Negotiations to extend the truce had run into late Thursday in Cairo. Israel had offered to extend the temporary humanitarian truce on Thursday, but Palestinian factions rejected the proposal at a pro-Hamas rally in Gaza City attended by thousands of people. Hamas leaders said they were ready to resume rocket attacks if Israel and Egypt do not honor their demands to lift the blockades into and out of Gaza. 66 Israelis and nearly 1,900 Palestinians were killed in the one-month conflict. As you will recall, the UN estimates about 70% of the Palestinian death toll were civilians. Now, the World Health Organization is set to announce in a couple of hours whether the Ebola outbreak in West Africa constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
After 2 days of emergency talks on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, the World Health Organization will announce Friday whether it concerns the matter a public health emergency worthy of international concern. If it deems that it is, the UN Health Agency will urge appropriate measures to curb the spread of the virus, which has thus far been largely contained to 3 West African countries. But concerns are spreading. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued its highest alert level this week in response to the outbreak. Amid growing international pressure to consider the use of experimental drugs in combating the virus, the U.S. government is forming a special Ebola working body that will explore its options. The calls have grown louder since 2 American missionary workers infected with the disease while in West Africa began recovering after taking an experimental serum called ZMapp. U.S. President Barack Obama has so far been hesitant to allow such untested medicines to be released for mass use.
I think we've got to let the science guide us. I don't think all the information's in on whether this drug is helpful.
The WHO says that more than 1,700 people have been infected in the current Ebola outbreak and that at least 932 people have been killed. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Fighting continues to rage in eastern Ukraine, where pro-Russian separatists are said to have shot down another military plane. Local media said the MiG-29 fighter jet was shot down in the Donetsk region Thursday local time, most likely with the same Buk missile system suspected to have been used in the downing of MH17 last month. Meanwhile, Moscow has released more details on its full embargo on food imports from nations that had sanctioned it. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said the year-long ban would include fruit, vegetables, meat, fish, milk and dairy imports and apply to Australia, Canada and Norway in addition to the U.S. and EU nations. 5 days after a powerful earthquake devastated parts of China's Yunnan province, rescue crews are still shuffling through the rubble in search of survivors. The number of fatalities has since risen to 615, with hundreds of others in critical condition, according to local authorities Thursday. Most of the deaths, more than 520, were in Ludian County. 76 others died in Chaojia County. Hundreds of epidemic prevention Personnel have been dispatched to the quake zone as tests on the area's water found risk of enteric-contagious diseases. Nearly 230,000 people were evacuated in the magnitude 6.1 earthquake, the strongest in 14 years. And Hurricane Iselle is approaching Hawaii. Its outer edges bringing rain and wind to the U.S. island state this hour. It would be the first hurricane or tropical state to hit the island chain in 22 years. Officials say they are ready for the storm. The Big Island is under a hurricane warning, and the rest of the state remains on a tropical storm warning. Another Pacific storm, Hurricane Julio, has also strengthened to a Category 2 storm, but it is still unclear whether it will hit the islands in the next few days. Earlier Thursday, a magnitude 4.3 earthquake rattled the Big Island, but no tsunami warning was issued.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju with Pro.
Market researcher, strategy analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11.
Pope Francis, who will be in town next week, will call for inter-Korean reconciliation, but he is not expected to travel to the demilitarized zone bordering North Korea. The Pope arrives in Seoul next Thursday, and he'll be greeted by President Park Geun-hye at the airport. Kim Young-gil reports on the Pope's itinerary released by the Vatican on Thursday.
Pope Francis will be the first pontiff in nearly 2 decades to visit the Far East when he visits South Korea next week. The Vatican said Thursday that during his 5-day visit, Pope Francis will attend the closing Mass at the Youth Day gathering and the Reconciliation Mass at Myeongdong Cathedral in Seoul.
Going to Korea and praying for reconciliation and peace for the Korean people has a great significant meaning.
He will also celebrate the Asian World Youth Day with young people across the continent and beatify the large group of martyrs who first brought the Catholic faith to Korea. He will find in Korea a Catholic church that exemplifies much of what he hopes for the church around the world to be, including a highly active laity. The Vatican also confirmed that North Korea has declined to send Catholic believers to a papal mass in Seoul, but said the invitation from the South Korean church was still open. Pope Francis will meet relatives of the victims of April's Haeoro ferry sinking, as well as surviving Korean comfort women who were forced into sex slavery for Japanese troops during World War II. For the first time on a foreign trip, Pope Francis will speak in public on 4 occasions in English among his 11 speeches. The pontiff's plane is due to fly over Chinese airspace, and Vatican protocol calls for the Pope to send greetings to the leaders of all the countries he flies over. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, major roads in central Seoul will be closed next week ahead of the papal visit. Pope Francis is scheduled to be in the capital city on August 16th, that is next Saturday, to attend a beatification mass at Gwanghwamun Square in downtown Seoul. The city's police agency says starting from next Monday, access will be restricted to some roads around this venue, and a day before the mass, major roads encircling the square will be totally closed off, including a stretch from the central government complex to Sungye-mun Gate. Meanwhile, the Seoul city government plans to temporarily adjust bus routes and subway times to accommodate the high-profile ceremony.
Now, Korea's largest automaker has been slapped with a $17.3 million fine in the U.S. for delayed reporting of a brake defect. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the U.S. says Hyundai Motor failed to notify them in a timely manner that certain components on Genesis sedans produced between 2009 and 2012 were at risk of corrosion, which could reduce braking effectiveness and increase the risk of a crash. The Korean automaker recalled more than 43,000 vehicles in October 2013 after the US agency uncovered the issue. Hyundai says most of the affected vehicles have since been repaired. Now, in some health news, varicose veins can cause sufferers a great deal of pain and grief, especially in the summer when people may feel less than confident wearing things like shorts and skirts. Well, Sun Jung-in tells us how varicose veins can be prevented by making some rather small fashion changes.
Summer is the season for shorts and short skirts, but there are some who won't even consider that as an option for fear of exposing their legs due to lumpy dark blue veins visible beneath the surface. Varicose veins are developed when valves and veins are weakened or damaged. That disrupts blood from flowing up toward the heart. The blood then collects in the veins, causing them to become swollen and twisted. The condition is often hereditary, but other factors like aging, pregnancy, or standing up for long periods of time can also contribute to the problem. Women whose hormones tend to relax the walls of veins are more likely to be affected than men, especially women in their 50s. But recently, more younger women are visiting the doctor complaining of the issue. According to data, the number of female patients in their 20s here in Korea surged 5% on average every year from 2007 to 2012. Doctors say it is important to prevent varicose veins in the early stages by wearing elastic compression stockings to improve blood flow. They also advise people not to cross their legs when sitting for a long period of time.
In some cases, simple laser treatment or sclerotherapy can effectively treat varicose veins. It leaves no scars so that people can regain confidence.
Standing in place and rising up on the balls of the feet can help strengthen the calf muscles to better push blood to the heart. Sun Jung-in, Arirang News.
Isn't it nice to see the sun this afternoon here in Seoul after all those gloomy days we've had recently? But that said, the eastern parts of the peninsula will see showers throughout the day with clouds sticking around. So it should feel a bit cooler for people in the east and south, while the remainder of the nation is forecast to have temperatures in the 30s. So the top temperatures here in Seoul and Gwangju will rise to 31, while Daegu will be a bit cooler at 28. For other regions, it looks like down on Jeju Island and Daejeon will peak at 28, and Dokdo should see a high of 24 this afternoon. Now, the Typhoon Halong has shifted to an easterly direction and is heading towards Japan. So Korea's Jeju Island and the south and east coastal regions will get heavy showers and torrential rain as a result of this storm, while we shouldn't see much of an effect in other areas. So the weather this weekend here in the capital will be just typical for summer under mostly sunny skies. But that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the speed round.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Yes, Jinju and I will be back at the same time on Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Goodbye.